Today, good afternoon. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Wednesday, April 20th, and the time now is 2:03. Notice for this budget hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was given on April 11th, second was on April 15th. For the record, today is April 20th. The committee will now hear Bill 276-36, COR, Committee on Rules, by the request of the I Maga'hågan Guåhan, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam, an act making appropriation for the operation of the executive branch of the Government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2023, making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions. This hearing we're having is relative to the Department of Administration's budget. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this afternoon. We have Speaker Therese Terlai, we have Vice Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, we have Senator Tony Ada, we have Senator Tello Taitigui, Senator Sabina Perez. I know we have Senator Jim Moylan. General rules for this public hearing. Those testifying on Bill 276-36 COR relative to the Department of Administration are invited to the panel. We have Mr. Byrne, who will introduce his staff that are with him in the panel. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes, but will allow you sufficient time to present your budget. Mr. Byrne. Those testifying will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, please remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Question and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of the general rule of conduct will result in removal from the budget hearing room. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room. For this proceeding, individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and will be removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Other questions may be submitted to the committee for submission to the agency or department for response. Please state your name and your title for the record. I will now ask the panel to please rise while the Sergeant at Arms will swear you all in.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information that you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay. Mr. Chair, under oath, you may proceed.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. I will now ask Mr. Byrne, the Director of Department Administration, to please introduce yourself and the panel, and then you may begin your opening on your budget. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Senators, my name is Edward Byrne, the Director of the Department of Administration. Thank you for the opportunity for the Department of Administration to present its budget requests for fiscal year 2023. We are happy to be heard early in the process. However, we will monitor the presentations of other line agencies as their activities almost always require some action by DOA. With me here today, on my right, is the Deputy Director, Bernadine Guinness, and on my far left, the Department's Administrative Services Officer, Florence Salas. On my immediate left, the Personnel Services Administrator, Shane Nagata. To the right of Ms. Guinness is the Deputy Finance Manager, Goody Rosario, and on the far right, the Controller at DOA, Mary Grace Adrosa. Both the Chief Procurement Officer and the Acting Chief Procurement Officer are on sick leave, so they're not represented here today, but we will obviously answer any questions relating to procurement. All the other personnel in the department, and in past years I know it's been the practice to bring supporters down here. All the other personnel in the department are busy carrying out their tasks. So rather than ask them come down here, I ask you to consider that their priority is to their work, and in that way, they're supporting the mission of the agency and its budget request. Firstly, I would like to recognize and thank the hard-working staff at DOA for their work in supporting the efforts of the 27 line agencies for which we provide professional services, as well as certain government-wide activities. We would struggle to provide these services without adequate resources, and those resources demand a fully funded budget. On their behalf, I ask you to support DOA with the human resources and the other tools that we need to do our job. During the pandemic, we were open and operational so that we could support the frontline and other agencies who are our barrier to the COVID virus. And we continue to fulfill that role. In addition, we've taken on new roles administering the federally funded Department of Treasury programs, the Emergency Rental Assistance, Homeowners Assistance Fund, and the Low Income Water Assistance Program, which I will speak about later. We assumed the first 2 releases of Program MISCELLANEOUS in 2020 for those citizens who did not qualify for other public assistance programs maintained by the Department of Public Health and Social Services, and during the last month for the cash assistance program for those considered economically disadvantaged under the US Treasury final rules in the amount of $300 per qualifying household. We also issued the check and EFT payments for other programs, both federal and local, such as LEAP, EIP 1, 2, and 3, the PUA FPUC Unemployment Program, All Rise, and many other economic support programs. We draw down the federal funding support for federal grants awarded to line agencies. We are the administrative arm of the local Guam War Claims Commission, and we negotiate, procure, and administer the government-wide health insurance program for active employees and retirees. All of these tasks, together with countless others, cannot be handled without a detailed and professional staff. When I hear the words, "Oh, it's at DOA," I know, and I can confidently tell you, that it arrived at DOA yesterday or even hours ago, and it's on its way to DOA at that moment, and DOA will deal with the issue expeditiously. As well as our employees, we need the right tools for our staff to deploy. We have operated a legacy accounting system for many years. There's no blame to allocate here. There were no funds to update or replace it, and we learned to make do. In the meantime, new accounting packages were put onto the market, which, if correctly implemented, will enable us to prepare and issue financial reports more frequently, and as so firmly advocated by the public auditor on your behalf, more quickly. As we will note later, current circumstances have afforded us more federal funding, but we have to account and manage this funding even though our systems have remained static. Procurement of a new FMIS system, which has accounted a number of hurdles not atypical of a major procurement by the government, was funded by ARPA funding and is proceeding. DOA will struggle to comply with local and federal reporting requirements without this needed major upgrade. The goal is to have the core of the new FMIS system in place before the end of the fiscal year. Preferably, it will be an in-cloud solution, always updated to allow compliance with the latest GASB pronouncements and other reporting and control needs. In spite of an outdated system, fiscal year 2020 audited financial statements were issued May 29, 2021, almost a month ahead of the deadline mandated by our bond covenants, and well ahead of our sister island territories, several of which have not yet issued reports for that year. Other achievements which should be noted are the pay studies compiled by the Human Resources Division. These were professionally produced studies, the recommendations from which were accepted by the Governor and Lieutenant Governor and were swiftly implemented. The aim was to prevent attrition and to stimulate applications from the best candidates. Generally, this has worked, and the recent job fair held by the Guam Police Department attracted over 300 applications. The coronavirus pandemic and the resultant imbalance in revenues has made our continuing review of practices and procedures all the more relevant. We are maximizing the use of paperless documentation, both as a measure to help prevent virus transmission, but also as a more effective means of communication. Not all emergency processes used by necessity during the height of the pandemic are suitable for indefinite use, and we are not afraid to continue to examine our processes for constant improvement. Senators, you're familiar with the larger divisions at DOA, but I would like to mention some of the smaller ones which also carry out critical mandates. The Insurance and Benefits Division is responsible for the annual procurement of the smooth operation of the Guam health insurance contract. We managed a smooth transition from the previous carrier to 2 new carriers for over 26,000 employees, dependents and retirees who subscribe to these plans. This division is also responsible for the COVID bereavement plan, government life insurance, and war claims administration. We have established an internal audit division. Its purpose is not to duplicate the work of the public auditor, but operating under well-established internal audit guidelines, it can review and report on single processes with a focused view. It has already reported on cash receipts posting, tenant revenue operations, and certain Medicaid issues, and reports can be viewed on the DOA website. It is currently looking into bid security deposits at GSA and another investigation requested by an agency director. Recently established as a Supply Chain and Control Support Division, although currently fully engaged in processing the FMIS procurement, banking services procurement, and the DOA office space lease, it is intended that this division will help agencies to navigate the requirements of procurement, standardize and improve bid specifications, monitor contract provisions which are outside standard issue, and most particularly, be the lead participant in promoting and facilitating planned procurement, a requirement of current procurement law, an obviously necessary step towards economic consumption. This division, together with the Procurement Policy Office, which reviews and establishes procurement policy, will allow GSA to concentrate on their core activity, procurement. Policy should govern procurement, not procurement shape policy. The Deputy Director will take you through the slides which we brought here to share with you today. We hope that these and our responses to any questions which you may have will permit you to get a full understanding of the many daily tasks which we undertake in support of our mission to be the brains and the heart of the system under which they operate. To that end, and to aid your understanding of an agency which necessarily operates in the background and sometimes is only noticed when something goes wrong, we have prepared a slide which highlights the vast difference between the responsibilities of DOA personnel and their equivalents in other agencies. Very often, finance and HR personnel, in particular, are more highly remunerated in autonomous agencies, even though the responsibilities and the job scope at DOA is significantly and almost startlingly greater. To help us prevent a brain drain to a less demanding job at these agencies, We are proposing in our budget a DOA professional compensation supplement, which will be payable when DOA job descriptions identify either tasks of greater complexity or stewardship of a higher magnitude of cash flow funding than the standard job description scope. I am always amazed and grateful for the loyalty to DOA of many employees, and we have been able to transfer 2 employees back recently from autonomous agencies, but I have to say that we've also lost 3 others to autonomous agencies. This is a new study, and the agency has not fully carried out the study, but we have included a sum of money in our budget request to fund this particular supplement. I should be remiss in not mentioning the sterling work done by our teams working sometimes long hours on the federally funded rental assistance and mortgage assistance programs. These programs, funded by US Treasury and administered by DOA, are designed to provide rescue funding for Guamanians impacted by COVID virus who are in danger of losing their homes. Payments are made to landlords, mortgage holders, and utilities under guidelines established by the federal government. We have to ensure that our procedures comply, and that involves much work by those in the team for these programs. Recently added is the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program. Funds for this assistance were previously included in the DPHSS block grant, but now have been separated so that needed assistance for water and sewage charges can be made quickly to those in arrears. It's only a small program at present, but it's hoped that when the awarding agency, the Administration for Children and Families, sees it being used for its intended purpose, the limit can be raised. DOA appreciates the opportunity to present its budget needs to senators early in this process. The agency has to react to ongoing requirements by its client agency. We hope, therefore, that should a line agency in its own budget hearings propose an arrangement which will require input from DOA, you will consider the possible cost impact on DOA and entertain an amendment to our budget at our request, should it be necessary. Deputy Director Guinness will now go over the slide presentation which we have prepared, and then we will be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. I'd like to also recognize my colleagues that have joined us, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Chris Duenas, and Senator Trina Nelson. Ms. Janice, you have the floor.
Can we put up the slides? Got it? Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you for having us. I'm Bernadine Guinness, the Deputy Director for the Department of Administration. I'll go ahead and go over the slides with you all. First off, we'd like to just show what the organizational chart is of the department. Of course, we have the director and myself. Quickly below us, we have the internal audit section, and then also the administrative support services. Below those items, we also have all of our divisions that fall under the department. First, we have our Human Resources Division, again headed by Mr. Nata, Shane Nata. We have our Insurance Benefits Branch. We also have our Divisions of Accounts, which is headed by Mr. Goody Rosario, and then also with Ms. with Grace. And then we have our General Services Agency. Along that, we have recently put together 2 new divisions within the agency within this year, which is the Supply Chain and Contracts Support Division, and then also the Federal Local Programs. So again, on the right-hand side, you'll see the new programs that we have: Emergency Rental Assistance, Guam Homeowners, the Guam War Claims Program in Salepi, the LIWAP, the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program, and of course, we also have our Procurement Policy Office. Next slide, please. This is the listing of all the FTEs within the department. So under the Director's Office, we have 4. Human Resources, we have 21. Insurance and Benefits section, we have 4. Under the Division of Accounts, which houses the accounting, the payroll section, and also Treasurer of Guam, we have 52. Then we also have the General Services Agency, GSA. We housed 12 individuals. The Internal Audit section, we have 2. The newly implemented division, the Supply Chain and Contract Support, there's 1 individual. Emergency Rental Assistance, otherwise known as ERA, we have 19 individuals. And then the Homeowner Assistance Fund, the HAF, there's 9 individuals with a total of 124. Next slide. So these are some of the achievements within the department for this past year. We're very proud to say that we've controlled the cash flow under control, allowing 1, payment of tax refunds as soon as payment information is transmitted by the Department of Revenue and Tax. Secondly, payment of vendor invoices within 30 days if received promptly by DOA. Lastly, the deficit eliminated to ensure expenditures are only for current year's appropriations. Another highlight, and that we wanted to stress, and of course Director Byrne mentioned in his introduction, is the pay studies that happened and occurred during this year. We had the nurses' pay study that was implemented on June 18th of 2021. We also have our law enforcement that was just recently implemented this January 18th of this year. We also have the teachers' pay plan that is currently in progress, and we are soon to complete and transmit to the governor. And then soon after that, we'll move into the general pay plan. Another highlight, another achievement from our human resources section, we have the recruitment cycles. This year, under the Guam Fire Department, our team was able to onboard 34 new firefighter recruits. Under Guam Police Department, we've tested approximately 190 applicants for consideration for GPD, and in preparation to test over 300 applicants for continued recruitment efforts. Under the Customs and Quarantine Agency, we tested over 800 applicants to establish a list of qualified applicants for consideration for the CQA agency. In addition, under the procurement section, our procurement policy office continues to review and procedures to update statutes and regulations. Next slide, please. In addition to some of the achievements within the agency, we have major federal and local programs that were established within this fiscal year. The very first one, which took place in March 15th of 2021, which was the first emergency rental assistance program. To date, we have received 1,467 applications that have applied, or households that have applied. And we've assisted over 3,364 applicants with a total financial assistance of $13.3 million. Our first payment went out on May of last year, 2021. This program, this ERA-1 program, is still in existence. It's still current and it's still running, and it ends until September 30th of this fiscal year, 2022. Emergency Rental Assistance 2, which we currently have the funding for, that expires on September 30, 2025. We have yet to touch the monies yet in this particular cycle or this particular funding until we exhaust the ERA-1. Next slide, please. Another major accomplishment of the agency, we also created was the Homeowner Assistance Fund that started back in January. It started this January of this year until September 30 of 2025. We've received over 879 applications, of which 450 have already been assisted with a total financial assistance of $1.5 million. Again, the first payout for this particular program started in March. We just recently opened a second cycle 2 weeks ago. So again, we're anticipating more applicants to, more applications and more households to apply. Another highlight for us is, again, as Director Byrne had mentioned earlier, it's the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, otherwise known as LIWAP. Again, it just started 2 weeks ago. This is for the low-income households. So far, we've received 8 applications, which of course the 8 has been deemed eligible. So now we are currently processing the payments for these individuals. Next slide. In addition, the agency also has implemented the second Program and Select program, which ended this last week, Friday. Total household that applied via online, which the web-based online form, or also they dropped it off to our office, was 24,115 applications, of which the department has already reviewed and processed for payment over 5,350. So with a total assistance of 1,605,000. Again, this is still current. We're still paying. We're still reviewing the applications that were submitted and making the payments. Our goal is to make payments every Thursday for new batches. Lastly, we have the Guam War Claims Program, again, open and established on April 1st, which also ends. It's a year program, and it ends on March 31st of next year. As to date, our team, which again, the War Claims Program is housed at the Guam Museum. Our team has entertained and assisted over 855 individuals with their applications and their documentation. Thus far, DOA has reviewed and received 36 of the applications, the statements of claims, and has transmitted to the adjudication committee, who has reviewed it last week and processed and approved 4 applications so far. So now that those particular applications or those particular cases are in the phase of payment. Next slide, please. So these are some of the challenges and the goals for the agency. Certainly we have the procurement and the implementation of a new FMIS system to replace a legacy system. Also updating procurement laws and regulations to address current conditions and facilitate lowest cost, highest value pricing from vendors. We also have process revisions and programs to purchase efficiently and economically. Next, we have optimizing workflow to reduce hard copy paperwork and maximize paperless processes. Overcome resistance from prospective employees to commit to a career in Gov Guam because of uncompetitive pay scales and slow career progression. Another challenge would be staffing retention. We recognize that staff are leaving positions for better financial opportunities. And another goal for the agency is we recently partnered with the Society of Human Resources to create and enhance our existing training resources for the government. Next slide. Director, do you want to explain? Okay. So the next slide is a really great graph that would show you the differences within some of the different autonomous agencies that, in comparison to Department of Administration and the cash flow that comes through our agency, you can see a vast difference. Currently, DOA, as of fiscal 2021, has the cash flow of over $1.8 billion versus in comparison to the other agencies. So you can see there's a great disparity, a great variances amongst all of the agencies. And so this is something that we wanted to put together so you can kind of have an idea of what funnels through the agency, what the employees and the staff has to maintain, our accounting staff has to maintain. But again, we wanted to kind of have a reflection and show again what is out there for the department. Next slide, please. We also prepared for you, this is the differences between the executive branch request and also DOA's request. It just gives a breakdown as to the different sections, and then also the staffing that we requested, DOA requested, and then what BBMR went ahead and what BBMR submitted on our behalf. So page 10 and 11 would reflect those changes. If you want to go to page, next slide. Okay. So with that, so the differences between what was submitted from the agency with BBMR is 453,000. With that in the bottom, we are also asking, and Director Byrne had mentioned initially during his introduction, about the DOA professional salary increment, some requests for an additional 500. So the additional funding request total would come out to 953,000. Okay. So that would conclude our presentation, our slide presentation, and we are welcome to answer any questions that the body may have.
All right, thank you, Deputy Director. Simple question, Mr. Byrne. I noticed you identified a CFO position. Do you have one right now? Do you have a CFO in the department?
No, Senator, we don't. It's been an openly advertised position for many months, and Shane, maybe you have a recollection of how many months that position has been open.
Good afternoon, Shane Nata, Personnel Services Administrator. Yes, the CFO position has been continuously announced for at least a year and a half. We don't get many applicants for it. In my conversations with Director Byrne, our first assumption is that the salary is non-competitive for that level of position and for the responsibilities tied to the CFO position. But there's not much interest for that position for DOA.
Is it because of I guess the pay, or is it?
I'm assuming as much as the pay and the scope of duties tied to that position and the accountability of that position in the government. So,
Senator, you saw that slide and how much that position would be responsible for the custody of those funds.
Yes.
And for the amount of the compensation that we're currently able to offer for that position, I think it would be challenging, and continues to be challenging, to find an applicant.
Yes. Mr. Byrne, I got a simple question before I ask the Oversight Chair of HR Vice Speaker to start out. How many agencies do you oversee that DOA technically controls, the number of agencies?
We operate on behalf of 27 agencies, including a couple, by mutual arrangement. Like we pay the salaries for the public auditor and the Attorney General, who, although they manage most of their other agency requirements, rely on us for payroll.
Okay, another simple question. Is there any agency that kind of equates to what you do and how many people they have compared to your agency? You know what I'm leading you to. I know DOA has a big branch of personnel, HR, the whole works. What's the difference? How many people do you process? How many do they process? Can you tell me that? Or we can save for another day?
Well, comparisons, of course, are odious, even though I was trying to make one earlier. But we have an accounting department, right, that has, as you saw, about 50 people in it, which manages payroll and treasury items and accounting for all these agencies, this 1.8 billion that we were talking about. An agency like, and as I say, comparisons are odious, and I don't know exactly what each person in that agency does. But UOG, for instance, which has a cash flow of about 75 million, has like 9 accountants in. So if you're looking at the dollars that divided up by the number of people, we outnumber it by like 200 to 1.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask the Oversight Chair to ask questions, and I'll finish it off at the end of the hearing. Madam Vice Speaker, Oversight Chair, if you will, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to you, Mr. Byrne, Deputy Ms. Guinness, and to the panel members this afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate the presentation because I was looking at some of the questions that I had, and you did have a couple of them. Out of 7, I had a couple of them answered, but I did want to ask, just recently we heard about the $3 million in retroactive hazard duty pay to customs officers. I know that the process for paying out hazard pay and other differential pay is collaboration between the line agencies and DOA, but we hear about this backup in pay, not just at customs, but other agencies as well, too many times, and I'm worried that our employees are not getting what they are owed in a timely manner. So I'm going to ask you, Mr. Director, from your perspective, Director Byrne, what can be done to address the issue and streamline the process, and do we need to get the HR departments at all the agencies together, or do we need to digitize the payroll submissions? Is there anything to that effect that we can look at?
Thank you, Vice Speaker. The way I look at it, we're the HR department and the payroll department. These employees are just as much our employees as they are the employees of the agencies in which they work. We want to look after them as well as their agency directors, if not better. The customs retro pay that you mentioned at the very beginning of your question was held up because of, and we actually spoke about this at a roundtable hearing last week, I think it was held up because information wasn't flowing from customs to DOA in order for it to be paid. There was a reorganization of the customs agency, and they worked very hard there to get the information to us, and that amount, which is a retrospective amount, will be paid on Friday because it's a non-payroll day, so the payroll department was able to process those payments. Payroll department, as I mentioned earlier, was one of the key departments throughout the COVID pandemic. They came in every day because we had to pay the employees of the frontline agencies and public health and all the other people who were deployed on combating this pandemic. But behind the scenes, they were paying these people and working sometimes very long hours to do so. Some agencies, for reasons that we're kind of still looking into, were very remiss in passing to us their, for instance, their hazard pay. It was a separate payment, required a separate record, and some agencies got very behind in this. And once you start to get behind and it starts accumulating, it takes a big effort to catch up. I'm pleased to say that many of these agencies are catching up. I believe with public health, a couple of weeks ago, we were current up to February, which is a huge, vast improvement on where we were before. So I am anticipating that this problem will diminish and hopefully go away, but we do obviously encourage all agencies not to let go of the problem, otherwise it will recur again.
Okay, so the need to digitize the payroll submissions and all that is not
yes,
needed? Or
yes.
is,
The payroll is partly digitized, but as I mentioned during my earlier remarks, it's an old system. We are we are certainly making sure that in the new system it is more digitized to the point where it becomes more automatic. Some agencies feel, and this isn't the case, and we're trying to tell them that if you have an employee who's working on two different tasks in the week, that they can't charge it to the two different tasks. They can. It just requires a little bit more knowledge of the system. But we're trying to make it so that it's a more intuitive system, that we won't have this problem in the future. And that's going to be part of this new FMIS system. And obviously payroll is going to be an important aspect of an important module in that system.
so that probably would be a better time in the next several months to catch up with you and see how you're doing with the system.
Yes, you know, we are always, so I am, and I know Shane is, we're always asking agencies not to get behind. If I see them get behind, in particular with overtime payments, which are supposed to be reported contemporaneously, then we get hold of that agency and ask them to attempt to get current. And there was a big problem last year, you know, about this time last year, but the problem has really gone away as far as overtime is concerned.
Okay, that's good to hear. So then in a similar vein, we also hear about the time it takes to fill vacant positions and get them on board. My question to you is, what resources does the agency need to make this process more efficient? And you know me, I've always been about being proactive and seeing what we can do to help the agencies, not to take things away, but to at least advocate for. So I think this would be yielded to Shane, right? Or okay.
Good afternoon, Vice Speaker. Thank you for the statement. As far as resources, the director, the deputy, and I have had long conversations about what we would need. Of course, we would like to ask for droves of staff, but we know that's not feasible. So we've been trying to take a look at the operation and come up with a reasonable amount. In our slide presentation, I believe on page 10, you know, DOA's request was for 5 positions. You know, internally within HR, there's a lot of room for succession. Within our division, we're looking at about 6 employees that are ready to retire. If you look at our 21 employees, that's a huge percentage. And these employees are supervisory level employees that take a lot of institutional knowledge. One of our issues is being able to get our current staff into those lead roles to start taking on more duties and more complex issues because of lack of vacancies. Right now, they kind of toe the line both on the policy level and the administrative level. So we're trying to work from the bottom up to create some reprieve for them so they can take the time to understand more of the laws, policies, and give us a fresh outlook on what we can do to make things better, and to also prepare for those retirements that are coming. I believe out of the 6, there's about 4 that at any day can basically go up to retirement and get their certification letter and say, hey boss, I've made the decision to leave. And they're all in critical functions. We lose one employee, a lot of things you know, get impacted. But as the director stated, we deal with the resources we have. So what we were looking at is a more strategic approach to gradually increasing staff, but not in large levels, kind of place them where they need to be. Right now, a lot of our focus is on law enforcement, and it's a long process to get them hired, so it does require a lot of manpower resources. Through the pandemic, we were able to take advantage of the dislocated worker program and things like that to get some temporary help along the way, and that's kind of kept us going. But as those programs come to an end, we look to try and create a more solid, sustainable structure in HR. So that's where we stand on that. Of course, there's always computers going down and things like that we try to handle on a day-to-day basis. But for the most part, we have a lot of what we need to get things going and move it at the fastest pace that we can.
Just want to make sure we don't have a brain drain there, right?
Yes, please, because my brain's getting drained as well. So.
You know, DOA has completed several competitive wage studies, including the public safety personnel, and just last month we heard that you and DOE are completing the wage study for teachers. What's the next phase for the competitive wage study for Government of Guam employees?
Thank you for the question. So yes, you're correct. We are collaborating with DOE as far as trying to get the educator pay plan updated and addressing some of the issues that they've experienced over the last almost 10 years. Once that's completed and recommendations are given to the governor, we intend on moving on to the general pay plan, which encompasses the broadest spectrum of industries and professions. It's the most complicated pay plan to address. We've started background work on it already as we're working with the educator pay plan, but a lot of these positions are critical to all your different industries. These positions encumber those regulatory positions that will help, businesses get established and things like that. Also, you're looking at those environmental agencies, the public health agencies, and your things like engineers, right? One of the conversations I always have with Public Works is, man, we can't pay our engineers enough. And I said, well, yeah, it's tough. So we've been trying to entertain and look at different options to try and address that in this update of the general pay plan and become a little more strategic in what we recommend for those certain professions. There were other positions that I believe GMH reached out to us, right? A lot of their ancillary and allied health positions need to be addressed because they weren't addressed in the nurse pay plan. Those are things that we're looking at trying to take care of in the general pay plan. So it is a hefty pay plan to take on, but once we finish with the educators, we plan on moving on to that.
So if you had to shoot for a timeline, what are we looking at? I mean, I know there's all these moving parts, but if we had to at least give a general idea to all the government agencies, what could be a fair timeline? Last one.
Okay. I'd like to say.
And how many people are we looking at? How many?
Oh, in the general pay plan? Well, it also includes agencies like DOE, right, and the hospital and other autonomous agencies. So any given number will range around 2,000 to 3,000 employees across the board.
Really?
Yeah, so it's.
Madam Vice, simple question relating to what you're doing, Shane. How many are in the personnel branch, and how many in that personnel branch is handling and entertaining the pay plan? I'm trying to make sense of it because that same branch, you handle everything else.
Yes.
So, and I think my colleagues need to know this, because when you say you need people or whatever, we need to make sure we know what you're asking for and the reasons why. Because my understanding, I think it was only you and one more person trying to do this monster program, and God bless you. But if you can please just explain that further before we keep asking you, okay?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Chairman, you're correct. With the previous studies, I did conduct a lot of the work on it. The branch assigned to handle these pay plans, I've also been training as we've been going along the way. In totality, you're probably looking at 4 people total. Of those 4 people, 5 now, but of the 5 people, 3 of them are also responsible for processing personnel actions for every agency under the line agencies. They're also responsible for doing the desk audits or addressing any issues regarding pay or classification. But because DOA's mandates are a little more far-reaching, we also address issues in autonomous agencies or provide guidance in those areas that they lack training in. So, yeah, those 4 people are responsible for just about the whole government when it comes to these issues. Not many autonomous agencies are able to train their staff in this field of HR because it's not used as frequently as it is at DOA and not in the same grand scale that it is. So, yes, Chairman, you're correct. There's about 4, maybe 5 people now working on this task.
It was kind of along the lines of what I was saying, Senator. We have to be subject matter experts in many fields in order to carry out our job.
Thank you. I promise you, Mr. Chair, just 2 more. In order to modernize our government of Guam, we need to address the procurement process. Has the Department of Administration and the administration looked into adopting a platform to digitize procurement similar to what other states and jurisdictions have adopted in partnership with, like, for example, the Amazon business?
Yes, thank you, Vice Speaker. Yes, we are, as we go through the department trying to modernize things, the procurement department is the one that we're getting to now that we've got what I believe is better performance and control in the other departments. It's important, and therefore, again, we determined that we are going to include this in the FMIS system along with all the other activities that we're going to buy modules for. The digitization that we currently have for procurement is kind of fractured. It's digitized, but not easily recognizable, and it's hard to put it's hard to put the information together. And then when it gets to accounting, it's Grace who's responsible for overseeing the payment of these procurement invoices. We have to look in many different places to find all the documents that we need, because we've basically got 3 different systems involved. So we're going to unify the system and make sure that we, for instance, have better access to the federal GSA system, which will also form part of our procurement process, because they've done a lot of the work already. So it should be unnecessary to do the work all over again. So that will be one of the considerations that we will put into the new system, and that will form part of the total procurement module. Over the past few years, I think we should recognize that because of the funding position of the government, procurement basically was set up to defer payments. But we're not in that position anymore, and we all have to recognize the complete sea change and turn around and make sure that procurement is as swift and efficient as possible.
Yes. Okay. Appreciate that comment. Mr. Byrne, my last question is, and I know you spoke about it earlier under your achievements, the DOA has been tasked with administering the certain benefit programs like the Programan Salapi, Emergency Rental Assistance, Homeowners Assistance Fund, COVID bereavement support, and war claims. And I just want to ask, as I'm looking over some of the numbers here, is the department up to date on administering these programs? Because I see that in some of the programs, the amount of the federal funding received there's still a lot of resources in there, and I'm just wanting to know, is your department up to date with this? And I know you've been tasked to do a lot of work, and we appreciate that, but at what pace, right?
Vice Speaker, for example, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, 33.6 million is for ERA 1, fell under the, was from the U.S. Treasury. We have an admin cost of 3.3 million. And then the direct services, the remainder would be the direct services, which is about 30 million. Of that, because the program ERA 1 expires, it technically ends on September 30th this year, we've expended over 13.3 million. We know that there is a balance, but we are going to, right now, we're going to work with, work with Treasury to see if we can go ahead and continue on using the additional.
So you're asking for an extension?
Yes, and then because there is an ERA 2 that we've already have the funding for that, but we can't use that funding until we exhaust the ERA 1 funding. So we're reaching out, we're letting Treasury know. There is a reallocation program statewide, but the territories is the last that is going to be touched as far as them recollecting the monies back, which is what we don't want to do. So we are working with the household, letting it known to the community that the program exists for those who's needing it to please avail themselves to it. But again, we're still processing, we're still accepting applications and assisting the households.
And if I may add,
Yes.
Vice Speaker, the amounts that we received from U.S. Treasury were amounts that were allocated by U.S. Treasury based, I believe, upon certain census information that they had. They didn't consult us, and nor should they have, because we wanted the money quickly to start these programs, but they were their estimates. If we find, and I guess it's kind of good news that the situation locally isn't as serious because we don't have so many people in dire circumstances, that's a good thing. But we're still, because we're advertising still in newspapers and on radio and in other media, we're still advertising the availability of these programs because we don't feel that everybody who is entitled to them has yet necessarily availed themselves of it.
Does Department of Administration have a hotline for all of these programs that they can call to if
Yes.
we've gotten some
I'm sorry, what
constituent
was the
concerns?
question? Do they have a?
Yes, do you guys have a hotline or anything?
Yeah,
Because
we have the contact numbers, all of the new programs that we set up, along with our existing, our existing mandates for divisions are under our DOA website, which is doa.guam.gov. Everything is there, all the new programs. There's also online web-based form applications for individuals to apply if they choose to do so. They can also download the PDF applications. All the information is there for the different contact numbers that they can call for if they are needing the assistance for the different programs that we have.
what about for those who don't have access to the computer-generated items?
Certainly, they can call our agency directly, and then we can go ahead and assist them from there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, maybe the last question, what is the number? Would that be the 475?
Oh, okay.
No, really.
Yeah,
and
for example, for the emergency rental assistance number, 638-4518 or 4519. There's quite a few numbers. So that's for ERA. And then for the homeowners number, we have, it's the 463, I apologize, what was that number?
I just wanted to make sure because, some of those constituents come our way and the difficulty of getting somebody to, on the DOA side to answer, just wanting to give you the opportunity to give a number if all else fails, right?
If they want, yeah, certainly, my speaker, if they would like, they can call 475-1011, which is the director's office, and actually the operator, and it'll give you a listing of all of the programs that we have. So they can make, it's an automated reception, so they can reach out to ERA, homeowners, to program in Salepi. We also have the WAR claims and all the other different divisions that we have within the agency.
Thank you, Deputy. I truly appreciate that, and I know that the listening audience out there really appreciate that number too, just in case so they can be able to disseminate that phone number out to get all these programs started. Mr. Chair, thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for a very, very good presentation.
Thank Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. And I'm hoping the main media broadcasting outlets are going to keep announcing out of all the assistants that are there, because if they don't reach out, and the people of Guam don't reach out to your agency, they ain't moving anywhere. I'll now ask the speaker if she has any questions, and she'll be followed by Senator Sabina Paris.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I thought it was very unique, and I'm glad you did that comparison of the autonomous agencies in particular. Thanks for that. And Mr. Byrne, laying out your plans for the year. I appreciate that. And of course, I want to say thank you for all the work that DOA has done over and above its regular scope of work. And I want you to know that is recognized. We do appreciate that. I do. And I recognize that's really over and above what you signed up for during this, and because of the pandemic, you've really had to do a lot more. And so I appreciate, Mr. Byrne, you're pointing out that DOA, let's start with this, that DOA, that you're considering a professional compensation supplement for DOA. And so you described it as when job descriptions identify either tasks of greater complexity or stewardship of a higher magnitude of cash flow than the standard job description scope. And so then you did the comparison of the cash flow of the different autonomous agencies versus DOA. And I'm thinking that you're thinking about these federal programs have, their own cash flows that are coming through. But when you say tasks of greater complexity, well, let me just start in general first. So the authority for DOA to do this compensation supplement, is that inherent in DOA or in every agency, would you say?
First of all, Madam Speaker, can I thank you for those kind words on behalf of all the employees. I know they'll be encouraged to hear them. This proposal is designed, as I said, to prevent the brain drain. We want the brains.
Sure.
We need the brains in DOA. And the temptation to move to another agency, especially an agency which remunerates basically because they're using the same position description, they're remunerating somebody whose responsibilities are less for more. And that's a very difficult hurdle to overcome. So we're proposing that because DOA inherently, if I may pick up on your word, inherently has tasks that are more complex than other agencies, and Shane was just talking about the pay study, which basically only DOA can do because we have the people trained in that. And I know we often talk about GSA, but they have the procurement experts, and very often people have to refer to them to overcome problems just as much as problems are recognized. And if you talk to accounting, right? Accounting has to deal with many, many things that other agencies don't have to deal with. Something as simple as the bond payments, which other agencies have bond payments, but we have bond payments that come from many revenue streams, and we have to keep everything separately because that's good practice and because we told our investors that we were going to keep everything separately. So all these tasks are much more demanding than many other tasks that you find around the government. If you look at other governments, it's not unusual for those who are in the center to be remunerated more, not less, than some of their sister agencies who perform vital tasks, yes, but not with quite the same complexity. So that's we want to as well as preventing the brain drain, encourage applications. We want the best people to come in to government at all levels, but we particularly want the best people to want to come into DOA. And at the moment, I have to say, that's a bit of a struggle.
All right. I understand the intent. I think I perfectly understand that. I think there are other line agencies that have the same issue. And I think we were at the GPD yesterday. They have the same issue, right? GPD versus autonomous agency law enforcement sometimes. But so are you intending to accomplish this when you say compensation supplement through just changing the job descriptions and that would allow greater pay?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
that would be a permanent kind of change, right?
Yes,
And
that is
those
absolutely
positions.
correct. And thank you for raising GPD, because they have specific additional job responsibilities which we've just recognized in their pay plan.
Great. And then the authority for you to do this, is that always granted to DOA, or is that because, you know, several years ago we said DOA can do a compensation study whenever they want, or what do you think? Or is that going to be by executive order? Or what?
It would probably have to be by executive order, but it should, as you just said, it should relate to an enhanced job description that differentiates between the regular job and the job that we're doing. And you know, it doesn't mean every job is going to qualify.
Right.
Some of the jobs are more than equivalent, but there are key positions that we want to distinguish.
Okay. And so the supplement, maybe the word supplement was what was throwing me off. It's really going to be a job description change, right? So we change the pay.
Yes,
Okay.
I was struggling with that when I was writing it.
All right.
And I was trying not to use some of the terms we'd already used, but you're absolutely right.
Okay, and then the general pay study, do you intend to do that in batches, or do you intend to complete the entire rest of the government's general pay study before you release it?
Thank you, Speaker, for the question. The intent right now is to handle the GPP as a whole. When I said earlier, I stated that we're doing background work, so we're working on collecting documentation for what we need. A lot of the market analysis that is needed, I've already enlisted a couple of our team members to go ahead and start working on it. Because, you know, a lot of the critical positions have already shown themselves. Those that are hard to fill, those that are continuously on announcement without applicants. So the strategic target we would need to hit for those pay plans have already shown, and the pandemic has actually shown us more of what's hard to fill. And there's a lot of other positions that, yes, could use an adjustment, but for the major ones that we need to take a look at, the major groups, I think we kind of have an idea of where we want to go with the plan, and it's just a matter of getting everything together.
So you do it all at once?
Yes.
Pretty much. Okay, and then, so you're doing this without a consultant? You're doing it in-house?
Correct.
Thank you. That's great. I know you've done the others quite, well, relatively quicker than when we had a consultant, I think. So thank you.
Yes.
And much less expensive, it looks like, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, that's good news. I hope it results in less, you know, contentiousness over the results, and that it's swift as well. I know that, for example, the agencies that I work with, they seem to be having issues with needing job descriptions changed, or, right, different, that type of thing. And I always ask them, you know, have you given it to DOA? And they say yes. And I know, Shane, talking to you, I want to thank you for all your work. A lot of it is really, there seems to be a gap between the agencies and DOA in getting this information, or in the format that you need it, or whatever. And I'd just like to ask you to please, I don't know if how to solve that, but, you know, public health, they want some job descriptions change in regards to those for the, the benefits section. And this seems to be, they are having a hard time recruiting there as well, and that we need those positions to be filled in order to quickly sign people up for Medicaid and that type of thing. So that seems to be a gap. I think, well, there's some others, but yeah, those are just examples. I hope we have a solution for that this year, just solving those things without having to go through us, right? I know you don't need us to be involved if the agencies are dealing directly with you. Okay, Mr. Byrne, I have a couple direct questions on your layout of particularly the difference between the executive budget request and DOA's request. So first of all, BBMR had requested just about $340,000 for FY23 over the FY22 authorized level. But you are asking, in addition to that, $953,000. And so you laid it out for us. Thank you. It's detailed. I appreciate that. So can you just talk about this? You're asking for one employee who is a, what's she called? Records officer, $49,000. And then you're asking for a records shredding contract of $200,000. And I guess it looks like this is not a cost recognized by BBMR. Was this, how did we do it before?
Thank you. The answer is we didn't. I would hesitate to suggest that you go down to GSA and look at the record depository there. It starts out with good intentions, but unfortunately it hasn't been kept up. And there are two reasons why it hasn't been kept up, and those are the two things that we're trying to solve here. We didn't have or haven't had a records management officer for some time, so the management of the records was being undertaken by the staff at GSA in their, not that they have spare time, but in their spare time. When we want to dispose of the records, in the past, I believe they took a drum outside and set fire to the records in order to destroy them. I don't think that's a very good practice. So we need to have a proper shredding contract with a disposal company. So, and it is supposed to be done under controlled conditions where, you authorize the disposal of a record because its time expired, and you're supposed to witness its destruction. So we want to do all that in order to comply with the law, but also to be environmentally friendly and just a matter of good housekeeping.
I was going to make a joke about you could do both, given the contract, and then it burns down, but never mind. I was wondering, it seems to me that every agency would need that. Would this contract be able to accommodate the rest of the agency's needs for disposal?
Well, yes. The plan, Speaker, is this. First of all, many more records currently are actually digitized. I think we're not fully there, but there are many more digital records. And if anybody hands me a piece of paper, I tell them to go away and email it to me. So I don't have to dispose of it if I don't actually have it in hand. But there's a whole backlog of old documents which do need destroying. So as we get through it, the problem should start to diminish. One of the things that does raise, of course, is our policy for the retention and destruction of digital records, and it's one of the things that we're looking at.
Yes, okay, good. Yeah, the court just updated their policy on digital, so yeah, hopefully we will do ours as well. The health insurance contract, you're asking for $80,000 more than what BBMR allocated. Can you just talk about this amount? BBMR's allocation of $310, is that an increase from what was authorized last year?
The health insurance, what we're asking for here is the consultant that helps the health insurance team to negotiate the contract. As you know, the current contract with Aon expired last year, We are in the process of contracting with a new provider, but we're also adding tasks on to the contract that really were only peripherally dealt with before. So it's costing a little bit more, but obviously the savings we expect to gain from a reduction in the cost of the health insurance outweighs this additional 80,000.
I hope you're right about that. Will this include any study of the self-pay that was supposed to be done?
Self-funding, yes. Yes, we have included it in the current year's contract. We have had preliminary discussions with them. It's an area where you need a particular expertise, but we did discuss it with the consultant at yesterday's meeting.
Okay, great. And what about, so for your GSA request, it looks like you're asking for less employees than what BBMR had allocated, and I was going to ask you to be sure you're increasing the employees, but if you could just explain that, why do you need less than what BBMR has recommended?
We're asking for, in a couple of cases, for the higher rated employees. When BBMR did their their budget, they were looking at the
buyers.
Yeah, but not only that, but they were looking at the vacancies at a point in time. We are currently filling those vacancies, so we're trying to rationalize the whole thing and balance the number of people
Okay.
and the tasks at GSA.
Okay, that makes much more sense. And in addition to those, you're adding on a supply clerk and a records, that's the records
That's the
management
records
officer,
management officer,
GSA.
yes.
Okay. And then I know we talked about you talked about the audit and this new system that you get is going to allow us to get these audits done, the audit done faster because everything will be faster. It's my understanding. But was the audit, was your part of the audit done, would you say faster this year than last? That was what was promised, so I'm just checking.
Okay, we're in the middle of the audit season, and you've seen some agencies and departments issuing their audited statements. I have to say Guam is unique in many respects, but in this respect also, that we have agencies that are part of the general fund but are self-accounting. And in order to complete the compilation of the numbers for the general fund, you sometimes have to wait for these agencies to report. And that's something which is outside this particular system, but is something that we're working on too. That any new, a new system, I don't know, many senators are probably familiar with QuickBooks. If you put an entry into QuickBooks, it immediately reflects in the numbers that you see on the screen. Our current system doesn't do that. So modern systems do that. Obviously our requirements are much more complex than QuickBooks, but yes, we expect, and one of the things we're also doing, equally important, is recruiting accountants in preference to accounting technicians, because we need that expertise too. So the goal is over the next year is to get this new system in, to allocate accountants to specific general funds or special funds, because you've often heard me say we have about 80 special funds, as well as like 30 elements in the general fund, plus everything else that we're doing. So we're going to allocate accountants to those funds, so they will be responsible for reporting and keeping those funds up to date, so that not everything is a year-end exercise. It's a routine.
So, progress this year or not?
Progress this year, yes, a little progress this year.
Sooner.
But of course, we also had to deal with much more. So yes, we wouldn't have been able to deal with much more had we not made some progress.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously, we're in the budget discussions already, and that's why we want the audit sooner, right? To just see how we can use that ourselves. All right. My last question is the teachers' pay audit or compensation study. When do you expect that to be done?
Thank you.
We're actually, so what we did was, when we were wrapping up the law enforcement, we started taking a look at teachers already. So in this study, DOE actually put together a committee, a pretty big committee, to take care of the in-house classification part of it. So in speaking to their HR office, we kind of worked out how they should do that, and then they took it on, and they're working on that piece. We're working on the market piece for the pay. We're going to meet to discuss what both of us came up with. They've agreed to give us what they put together as far as job descriptions and whatnot. We did meet, and they're looking at possibly making some changes, right, on how teachers are hired and promoted and things like that. So we're discussing that. All of that's going to take place in the time that it needs to, but I think we're looking at the structure in and of itself being addressed within, I think we're looking at giving the governor recommendations next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next week?
Next week.
That's great news. Yeah, I remember one of the biggest complaints after the last Hay plan for the teachers was that the teachers with the most years really did not see significant increases versus the starting teachers. But I hope somehow that's addressed, or we're going to hear about it for sure.
Yeah.
If I could, sorry, one more question. Mm-hmm. So DOA was supposed to establish the drug policy for the government of Guam, particularly because cannabis was legalized, and so the governor was discussing this morning pardoning some of the offenses, right? Single offenses and misdemeanors for cannabis. So I just was curious, how far are we with that? The DOA's portion of the study that was supposed to be done as to policy.
Yeah, in regards to the drug testing policy for the government, yes. In conversations with the director, the things we're looking at really are narrowing down which parts of the policy that may need to be addressed or researched more. In totality, we need to update the policy anyways, because it's a pretty old policy, and there's some things that we can streamline in that. But outside of that, how to take into consideration the current cannabis statutes and how it affects GovGuam employees. The last time we took a look at cases in the states where companies or even districts accommodated laws such as the ones we have, it was at that time a 50-50 balance of cases, and a lot of them led back to discrimination claims and things like that. So it digs a little bit past our policy per se, and it's more so looking at the impact of what our policy would have on the employees. And it ends up becoming more of a legal conversation, I think, than anything else. So we want to make sure that whatever language or addendum to the policy we might put out is vetted as much as possible.
And we also have to deal with the dichotomy with the federal government having a different position on this, and the federal government providing funds to employ about a third of our, well, maybe a bit more now, more than a third of our employees. And we obviously don't want to run the risk of, and we're not alone. It's every state and every territory is having to deal with this issue.
All right. Yeah, speak of federal employees, so you're increasing your office space because of these additional, like, it looks to me 39 more employees or something like that, federal employees?
Maybe I'll ask, if I may, the deputy to talk about that.
Federally funded, not federal.
Oh, for our employees? Yeah. You're talking about the space-wise for?
Well, just federally funded employees, you're increasing them this year?
We are, I mean, as far as, we did put down exactly how many employees we currently have. Our staff has, for example, for like the program in Salepi, we have been using some of our existing staff to work to accomplish those particular, the mission for that particular program. As far as ERA and homeowners, we will still maintain the existing staff. The low-income household water program, because that's such a minimal program, again, we are just going to use the staff that we have on board, and then just offset their labor costs to that particular funding.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Byrne, you brought up job descriptions, you're going to do upgrades. Can you make sure that when you do the upgrades, nothing against autonomous, but make sure it relates to your agency? Because as autonomous agencies have adopted the rules and the personnel rules and regulations of Governor of Guam, if they wanted to increase their people's pay, they just match yours. But if your job description is specific to the area, you cannot borrow it because you don't do the same job. They have the same title, but the description is not the same. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yes, sir.
Okay? On another one, you mentioned record management officer. Do you process the destruction of record management or should you be destroying records the same as revenue and tax does? And the reason why, because I'm a former revenue and tax agent. I used to oversee or have to watch how the private companies pick up the records because of the sensitivity. And we had to watch them destroy, shred, and do what they need to do. And then we got to sign off that it is property destroyed. Is that a requirement with Gov Guam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's on the sheet that not only authorizes but provides all the steps for the destruction. It requires that the appropriate persons sign off that they have been destroyed.
Okay. I only asked that because you mentioned the burn barrel in the back. Okay, that's what I was concerned about. Yeah. I know revenue and tax doesn't have a burn barrel in the back. There's a private company that comes in to pick it up. The cameras watch them the whole time when they bring it to their yard and they go to the shredding. I'm just concerned about that. Now, Senator Paris, do you have any questions for the panel, please? And you'll be followed by Senator Tony Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Director Byrne and everyone who's here. I really appreciated the presentation, and I thank you for all the hard work as well. I think a lot of the questions were asked and answered. There's just a couple of things in regards to, I think parity for me is a big issue, and within the government, and it seems like we're piecemealing a lot of the increases, right? And what happens is that some agencies are left out of it, and particularly Department of Revenue and Taxation, for instance. They have a lot of expertise that's needed, financial expertise, and I've heard people are leaving because they're getting higher pay within the line agencies, but for less responsibility. And so, and the other thing is the processing of GG1s. What is the overall, what's the timeline? I mean, I hear from 3 weeks to even up to a year. And do you have any quality assurance or quality control when it comes to expediting the GG1s? I guess this question could be for either Director or Shane.
I'll ask Shane to answer the second part of your question, but the first part of your question about this disparity between people in different agencies and how you measure their job content, that we have to deal with the fact that we have a classified service, and the idea of a classified service is you construct a job description, and that job description is supposed to be good for the employee's work in any agency. That's obviously a compromise, and it doesn't always work, and that's what we're trying to deal with here. But as for your question about the order in which we're doing these studies and how we just how we've got different studies coming out at different times. Because we're doing it in-house, we don't have the either the resources, nor do we necessarily think it's a good idea to hold back the whole thing until the last one is done. The governor asked us to look at what she considered to be the most urgent needs, and so we started with the nurses, and then we looked at law enforcement, and now we're moving on to teachers, and as was said, we're going to look at the general pay plan as soon as we're finished with the teachers. But we've been dealing with it, I think, pretty quickly over, in the big perspective of things, seeing that basically it was static between 2014 and middle of last year when we started to look at the nurses. So that's the compromise that we had to accept. But I think with the speed that we're doing with it, we've got more contented people than discontented people. Do you want to answer the second part?
Afternoon, Senator. Thank you for your question. In regards to the GG1s and the processing, I guess the way I would approach it is it depends on what kind of GG1 we're processing. A lot of times the departments that are more experienced in the whole process would actually do a lot of head work before the GG1 even leaves their department. In that instance, when the GG1 finally gets down to us, if everything's in place in regards to the QC question, if everything's in place of either one, what's statutorily needed to process it, or two, what's governed by the rules, a GG1 could be processed and an action be cut and sent to payroll within the same day if it comes down to us. A lot of the work is trying to help departments get to that point where they have everything that's needed for HR to move the GG1 through. Departments, have to contend with their own internal processes, then the requirements of budget, and then finally DOA. So trying to help them walk through each of those to where it gets to us, and we can process it quickly. Sometimes fares better when the departments themselves have more experience in the process. What we're finding a lot of now is those departments that have admin personnel that are pretty new to the government are trying to walk their way through that. So yes, sometimes it may take a while depending on what's needed for it, but in most cases, if they work with us ahead of time, we try to get those barriers out of the way before it gets to us.
Is there a way to make sure that all agencies are on the same footing as far as the training, what's needed of them?
Yeah, there's definitely a need of training for all the administrative processes, ours inclusive. I think on top of that, it depends on what kind of agency we're dealing with. Some agencies have like public health, right? They have a lot to deal with and they have a lot of different divisions, but smaller agencies or medium-sized agencies that have a more singular mandate, it's easier for them. But yes, there's a few approaches that we could look at to trying to close that gap and help them move along in the process.
Okay, the other thing is work keys. Does Department of Administration look at work keys as a requirement for hiring? Because this is something that's very, it's part of, I guess, the workforce development.
Currently, we don't use work keys as a pre-assessment rate for the jobs. I understand that there is statute to support that. That would have to go hand in hand with updating most of our job specs and requirements, and seeing which departments the statute one would require to use it, and which ones are exempted, and which entry-level positions we're looking at. But yes, we have entertained work keys and other approaches outside of work keys to have that skills assessment ahead of time.
Okay, thank you for the response. So I'm really happy to hear that there's a supply chain and control division. This must be fairly new because it's not in the budget proposal. How new is this position?
Senator, this was, I think, 2 months ago. Was about 2 months ago that we've established the new division.
Yeah, it's great to hear your focus on planned procurement, contract monitoring, and, helping with standardizing of specifications. I think that would definitely help streamline procurement, address many of the issues that we're experiencing today in government and our services. So I do applaud you for this.
I'm hoping that the regular, GSA in some aspects has to impose regulations, and that prevents them sometimes from helping the purchasing agency deal with the more technical aspects of purchasing, and that's what we're hoping to bridge that issue.
Okay, thank you. And in looking over at GSA, I'm looking at the staffing pattern, and according to the budget proposal, I only see two buyers on the list and one buyer supervisor handling, is it 27 line agencies? In your budget update, you have only, I believe, 3 buyers you want to add. So if you can confirm, how many buyers do you have now, and how many buyers do you intend to hire?
So far, we have 4 buyers, and we anticipate to recruit two more buyer 2s. We have 4 buyer 1s and 2 more buyer 2s.
Do you see that as being adequate to handle the procurement? So according to the 2023 projected level, there are 4,360 purchase orders processed, requisitions processed 3,252, purchase orders issued for invitation for bid 728, and then there's requisitions for the tendon at 661. Do you consider the 6 buyers sufficient?
Thank you, Senator. When we looked closely at the work of GSA, the first thing we did was bear in mind that the goal is for the lower valued purchase orders that they are actually done in the agencies. Under 15,000, purchase orders can be actually processed in the agencies. So what we were trying to do was separate out those who deal with repetitive purchasing, which either can be done in the agency, or if it exceeded that amount, will be done at GSA. But more importantly, the purchasing which needs bids and the compilation of the bid needs to have more supervision and higher or greater experience in the purchasing cycle. So we were trying to do that at the same time. But I think we believe that, fully staffed, and we're not there yet because, as I mentioned, we're currently recruiting, fully staffed, that and with improved systems, GSA would be able to complete their task. I'm well aware, because I attended the federal seminar on infrastructure, that there's a lot of funding coming down to us, fortunately, from the Infrastructure Act, which is going, and a lot of it requires procurement. Some of it's construction, and that will be dealt with by DPW. But there's other procurement as well. But it's a more complex process, and so we want to make sure that GSA is equipped to do that, and we've set up this other division to take out some of the tasks which either they're not doing or they're partially doing, and taking it out of that so that they can concentrate on procurement.
Yeah, because I remember when I was first involved in the conversation, there was a lot of complaints about how things get stuck at GSA. Do you find that there's an improvement to that, or in regards to clearing purchase orders?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Yes, there is an improvement. I'm not saying we don't have crunch times. And we're kind of in a crunch time now because we have to get some contracts in place before the end of the financial year. And as you know, if they're over $500,000, that requires the involvement of the Attorney General, and that in itself is another course to run. But generally, yes, there has been an improvement, and actually, I've been looking at the number of purchase orders that have been issued in the last 2 or 3 months, and there's been a significant improvement.
Okay, and going back to the informational hearing that I had, there was talk about there's an employee from the port. Is that port still working at GSA? As
Yes,
a buyer?
that employee, that employee is not an employee of GSA, but she is at GSA doing GSA work. I actually, in a conversation with the governor this morning, I suggested that we needed to somehow regularize that. We can't have that informal arrangement going on forever.
And so according to our Budget Act, it states that an employee of an autonomous agency may not be transferred to a line department. So there's a prohibition of that.
Well, she's still being paid by the port, Senator, so I guess the view was taken, and I have to say that, that I wasn't involved in this from the beginning, but the view was taken that she actually isn't transferred. She's just working at GSA. And as I say, I don't think it's a very satisfactory situation, and I'm absolutely sure I need to rectify it.
Okay, so yeah, please keep me posted on that in regards to that.
Certainly.
Okay, I think those are all my questions, but I do thank you.
Senator. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. I'll go ahead and address Senator Tonietta this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps I just have a couple of questions and going back. Director Burns, are there any employees that are currently, do you have any currently hired employees using ARP funds?
From well, traditionally...
Is it yes or no? I'm just asking, were there people, employees hired with ARP funds?
No, well, please allow me to answer.
Okay.
We didn't have any federal funding at DOSA until the introduction of the federal programs. So we do have some employees under these programs, but they're funded by their programs, not what I believe you're referring to as the general ARP funding.
Okay, so they're employed with the federal funds. Does your budget reflect any of those employees transferring over into the general fund budget? No.
No, sir.
So when is the, I guess, the last day of those employees that were hired with the federal funds? When the program ends?
When the funds expire, and I'll ask the deputy because she did explain this earlier.
So there's several. Oh gosh. There's several term dates for example, like the ERA program. ERA 1 expires this September 30th. But certainly we have the ERA 2 program that's coming about that's going to end in September of 2025. Then there's also the homeowner program. Again, that particular program ends in September 30th of 2025. And then we have, of course, the low income. Again, we're utilizing, like I mentioned earlier too, Speaker, we are utilizing the existing employees, 1 or 2 existing employees, and we'll just offset their costs to the program. So it really is dependent on when the program ends, when it terms.
So whether the program ends or the funding has been exhausted,
Correct,
right?
yes.
So is there any intentions by the department to move those employees once the program ends or the funds are exhausted into other slots within the department or agency, in the agency that is not reflected upon the budget here?
If there is positions that are open and they qualify, certainly they can avail themselves to it.
Okay. You mentioned the law enforcement pay. I understand that the media had mentioned that they're 5 pay periods behind for GPD. What's the status with that?
Do you want to talk about that?
Good afternoon, Senator. Are you referencing this is for the differential pay for GPD?
No, it's not the differential. I think this is the retention pay, right?
Yeah, okay. The
Yeah, the
10%
5 pay
of-
periods that they're behind.
Right, I think payroll. I think they're working on getting. There were some increments that were due for some of the employees, right? That were processed, but when we implemented the law enforcement pay, there was a compensation feature and a pay grade feature, of which some of them were upgraded as part of our review. And so in those, it had 2 basic actions that were executed. One was to bring them up into the new pay plan, and then to move them into the new pay grade. So for some of the employees, we couldn't move them straight into the new pay grade without having their increments in place. So what we were dealing with was trying to see if we can balance out increments that were submitted later and try to, amend the pay then. And so I think we were trying to firm it up with payroll to make sure that they got to where they needed to be pursuant to what we audited them to be at the end of the process. So yeah, there was some delay in trying to get the increments through. We've been working with GPD to basically tick it off the list of those that are due, and our sections have been trying to push it out since.
So where's the delay at? Is it at GPD or with DOA?
I think we did try to collect as many salary increments prior to the implementation. So it's just a matter of trying to get it through. And then on our end, the section that's effectuating the pay actions over to payroll also have other actions that we're processing at the same time. So it's kind of on both of our ends, trying to make sure that all of the documentation's in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other one I had was I was looking at the federal programs and federal and local programs. The one local program that I wanted to inquire about is the COVID-19 bereavement program. Where are we at with that?
The COVID-19 bereavement program, the funding for it it comes from ARP funds. We've paid out, as you know, unfortunately, we had over 300 fatalities, which were attributable to COVID, and we've paid out, I think, all but 7 of the applications that we've received, and we process them continuously.
So it's pretty much up to date from the last report that we had, where it was only about 1.5 million that was paid out, or 1.3 million that was paid out, about 130 individuals that were already paid out, and I think that was February's report, February or March
So,
report.
Senator, if I may suggest, you need to also look at the report for the CARES Act, because some of the early fatalities were paid out under the CARES Act. So you need to add the 2 together to get the total.
So there's only about seven individuals
Yes,
that
sir.
are now waiting for compensation
Yes, sir.
from that. Okay, and how much is left in that program? How much funding?
Actually, there's nothing left. I have to talk to my colleague at BBMR to move some money into that program.
And so where would the funding be coming from to move into that program? Is it going to be coming?
That's the question that he must answer. I can tell you that previously, when this happened, the money was reallocated from what had previously been allocated to the hospital. But it's up to him, obviously, to respond to where it's going to come from in the future.
And what's the processing time for that? From the time the individual turns in their documentation or what's the processing time, the turnaround time?
It's about 14 days, assuming that we get all the documents. We've had a few incidents where the death certificate was not clear, and we had to get clarification from, which meant that the family of the bereaved had to go back to the certifying doctor. But generally, it's only about 14 days.
About 14 days? Okay, that's great to hear. Yeah, you know, my colleagues asked majority of the questions already, so I'll just yield to the rest of my other colleagues here for their questions. Thank you, Director. Thank you, DOA, for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Senator Eda. Senator Tello Tadiwi, do you have any questions, ma'am, for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It was earlier discussed about GSA and the 4 buyers, and you're looking at having 2 additional recruitments. With regards to that, of the 4 buyers, are you also incorporating that one as that one individual who's from the Port Authority over as one of the 4?
No, Senator, we're not.
Okay, so that's considered a fit. So how many other than that one from the port, from the autonomous agency, is over at GSA?
There's nobody else from autonomy.
Just the port?
Just that one employee.
And you mentioned you were going to rectify the situation because based in the budget law, it's clear in the law that states no transfer on the autonomous agency. So you mentioned you're going to rectify it. What are the options of rectifying?
Well, I discussed it with the governor this morning, so I haven't really formulated exactly what to do, but I have to have a discussion with the director of the port as to how to handle this. As I mentioned, this was done without my consent at the beginning, so I'm in a position now of having to fix it. As I said, the budgetary prohibition of transfer, I think, was really meant to prohibit transfer of funding, and that was the reason why that provision was put into the budget. But I can see that it's an awkward situation, and we
Very
have to
much.
fix it.
How long has that person been there?
It's about a year now.
A year? Oh, okay. A year, wow, okay. Has there been any substantial salary raises given to anyone in DOA since the beginning of the pandemic to date?
Salary raises?
Any salary, other than your regular, allotted increments, but has there been any substantial raises given to any employees other than that, using general fund money or special fund money or?
No, Senator.
Okay.
Almost, with the exception of myself and the deputy, and the people we've spoken about with Senator Adder earlier, everybody is a classified employee and is in the classified pay plan.
Okay. Mr. Burns, any of the special fund accounts are used for your agency at all for any of the programs? Do you utilize any of the special funds?
Well, we have some of our own. The Tendon, the Tendon Gobetno fund is a special fund, and that's used to top up.
I'm sorry, say that last way.
The Tendon Gobetno, the inventory down at GSA is a special fund, and that's used to top up the special fund. They also have a fund which derives from the sale of government property. None of these funds, however, are very big.
Okay, I guess I'm looking at the special funds that we get a report on, the CRER report, every month showing some kind of fall. So if DOA is not receiving any of those funds, then that's not a concern.
We only have very limited access to funds, and certainly none of the big 6 that you see on the front do we get any funding from.
Yeah. Sorry if you have to repeat some of these questions, but sometimes it's hard to hear what you're talking about. Have you received any ARPA funding at all? Now, we're not talking about the one that comes, the ESF, all those other, we're talking about the governor's funding of $580 million that was given. Has anything been given to DOA out of that ARPA funding?
No, Senator.
Okay, and have you
But I
requested?
must add that the FMIS system is to be funded by ARPA funding, but there's no employees.
FES, okay, that one's funding. Have you planned on asking for any funding? to the governor for that?
No, not really. I'm here asking you senators for the funding.
Okay, there's a section here that was talked about earlier, a question with regards to the additional funding that you're requesting based on, I believe, prior you mentioned, well, actually, the budget that we received, it was only a difference of about $300,000+, but you're actually asking for 953. That's including the 300, right? So it's a total of 953. So of this 953, where do you plan on getting this funding from?
We're asking...
From the general fund?
Yes, we're asking for our, because we basically are a general fund agency, that the general fund provide these funds for us. We do get a little bit, just to clarify, we do get a little bit of money from the limited gaming fund. Could you speak about that, please?
So where are they going to get this? I'm sorry.
Under the limited gaming
Oh,
fund,
I think you need to lift that up again. Or come closer, please. Thank you.
under the limited gaming
thank you.
fund, there's like a portion of that limited gaming fund for the lease of the 7th floor ITC building for Division of Accounts, which is like 47,000 plus. That's transferred to general fund for the building lease, ITC building lease.
Okay. Is that limited gaming fund tracking on?
No, it isn't.
It's not, right? Okay. Usually all the, I'm hearing that all the special funds are not tracking very well. Okay, the other one is with the war claims fund, Public Law 3662 was enacted, in November, and authorizing an expended balance of the Guam War Claims Fund, and is to cover claimants who missed the 2018 federally imposed deadline. And with the local war claims program moving forward, what is the balance of the war claims fund currently?
The current balance?
Yes.
Maybe you have the number.
Thank you, Senator. We have yet to, there's four claimant cases that were approved. We have yet to pay them out. So again, right now, the 10 million was the total program award, and 500 is for administrative costs. 500,000 is for administrative costs. Like I said, we approved, or the adjudication committee approved 4 claimant cases, and it's in the process of payment, so.
And the full 10 million is already in that account, the war claims fund, correct?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Using, and that funding came from excess revenue of FY21, correct?
It came from the general fund, yes.
Which was categorized as excess revenue in 2021. Okay. The latest are, well, actually, there was about $5.8 million of $6.4 million allocated for the credit card fees, which has been spent as of the laytest ARP report that we receive monthly, and it's item 60. And I know you're trying to do everything you can as far as paperless, and being more efficient, and that means efficient with services as well. So what efforts has DOA made to date to secure a fixed fee per credit card transaction, allowing payers the convenience of non-payment payments and providing for timely collections and settlements of government debt?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all of your question, but...
So what have you been done, what efforts have been done by DOA to secure a permanent, a fixed fee for the credit cards?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for asking that question. It is something that we've been reviewing. The first question is the program worthwhile? And my answer to you, Senator, is equivocally yes, unequivocally yes. It has, in my view, accelerated and made payment easier for taxpayers and everyone alike. We are, as you noted, and it costs on average, and some months change because the tax paying pattern differs. Like obviously the month of April, we've got more taxpayers paying than normal because of April 15th and the second half of the property taxes on April 20th. But on average, it's costing something around about $400,000 a month. We do intend to ask you to perpetuate that, and we will come forward with proposals in order that that can happen.
So you're not looking at perpetuating that in FY23? Because right now the ARP funding is spending, the ARP funding is covering the cost of these fees, right?
Right.
Right now.
But we expect to exhaust the existing ARPA allocation. The governor has to decide whether to extend it by reallocating ARPA funds, as she may do. But it wouldn't be in our budget, but we do expect to come with some proposals for perpetuating the government absorption of credit card fees. And when we do, under the old system, when the taxpayer paid the fees, they were actually paying a higher fee than normal because of the way that it was structured. We expect to achieve the lower rate of fees that we're currently paying.
So right now, it's been allocated about $6.4 million? Yeah, $6.4 million allocated, and that you think is going to subsidize these fees till what month or year? Is it just to the end of the fiscal year? Or is it
the executive order, which the governor signed, extends the current plan through September 30th. So we have to fund that out appropriately, but then we have to decide how we're going to perpetuate it in the future.
So only until September then?
That's what the executive order.
And it's estimated at $6.4 million in these fees to September, right?
Yes, but okay. I would like to come back to you when we've seen how much has been paid in the last few days with credit cards. Is there anything, may I ask my accounting people if they want to add anything to that?
Good afternoon, Senators. Senator Tello, I need to extract how much on the credit card fees for the last few days, but as far as I know, we collected over 20 million just for April 15 and April 18 in taxes.
215 April. Okay, well, thank you then. That's Goody, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Goody. Okay. Also, Mr. Burns, can you confirm whether procurement activities are being carried out by charter schools following to follow the Guam procurement law?
I'm going to ask Grace, who deals with the charter schools, to respond to that, please.
Okay. I know we asked this, but I want to make sure that DOA is still doing this and how far you go when it comes to overseeing that these charter schools, not just the board, but the charter schools themselves.
Yes. Good afternoon, Senators. I'm Grace Rosa. I'm the controller at DOA. I do remember you did ask that question yesterday.
Yeah.
It is stipulated in the law. It's in the provision of the law what DOA's responsibility is. And it does only state the verification of accuracy on the invoices. But we do take an additional step in making sure that if there's contracts or purchase orders, that those are provided by the charter schools when they're submitting their request for drawdown. But as far as making sure if procurement policies and procurement laws are complied, we are not in a position to verify that. But in terms of processing payments, we do make sure if there are purchase orders or contracts, those are provided to us.
And those are provided with explanations on how it was achieved to be able to pay for that funding? Or, I mean, I don't understand because the funding is coming to these schools per student, right? And then that full amount goes to the school. And then when they do services, contracted services, don't they get 3 quotes out there, for that type of services? And it's as simple as DOA, looking at that and seeing if they're following that procurement process.
Let me just add, I remember before the responsibility of reviewing invoices was turned over to DOA, it was reviewed by GDOE. And at one time, DOE went as far back as inquiring and rejecting payment requests because they were not complied by the procurement law. So we had requested an opinion from the AG's office, and they came back to us and clarified what the responsibility is, which is only to verify invoices. If procurement laws are not complied, they had mentioned that it is the responsibility of either OPA, or if their audit is conducted, that it should be cited as a finding. But
I'm sorry,
on
the last
law,
part, it should be what?
cited as a finding.
Okay.
But for the responsibility of DOA, it's very clear in the law that our responsibility is to only verify the accuracy of the
I see.
invoices.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, thank you for that information. I'll do some research myself on that, on the Attorney General's report. Okay. Mr. Byrne, the governor's use of transfer authority is currently not reported in the legislature, reported to the legislature. In viewing DOA's workload output contained in DOA's decision package, is there a workload indicator reflecting adjustments to an agency's budget resulting from the governor using her transfer authority?
Well, the Governor's Transfer Authority is a matter really for BVMR. DOA doesn't have any input to that except recording what, and I believe that the transfers that are actually in effect for fiscal 21 and which will be reflected in the audited statements were supplied to the Speaker and have been incorporated by DOA according to that schedule.
Okay. So you know what I'm talking about in reviewing your workload output contained in your DOA's decision package. You know what I'm talking about in that perspective, right?
In the budget proposal, yes.
Well,
yes.
the decision package.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to move on that one. I'll talk to you more about it because I'm not getting the answer that I'm looking for, with regards to that. So,
please ask, if you want, please come back and ask us the question outside this forum if you wish. Right?
yeah, but sometimes it's kind of hard. Well, I did ask you the questions, and that was your response, but I can elaborate, and because I know my colleagues have other questions, I'm going to move on and just give you one other concern I have. DOA currently manages 3 federally funded non-matching programs, and you mentioned it earlier to the Deputy Director, the Emergency Rental Assistance, the ERA program, and with the grant period ending on September 2022. Then you have the HAF, which is a homeowner's assistance, which is at $29 million, and that grant period ending at 2024. By the way, the ERA, I have it at $33 million for the grant. Please correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers. And then, of course, the LIWAP, which is the low-income water assistance program, and that amount is at $13,587,562, ending in September 2024. Those are the numbers that I have. The governor's FY23 for these programs reflects funding for 36 unclassified positions, compared to 25 for FY22. And so my question is, why is there an increase in the number of employees when the combined available federal funding for FY 2023 is $29 million, 29 plus, which is considerably less than the FY22, which is about 40 million. Okay, so you have 3 programs. Based on what you received, these programs reflect 36 unclassifieds, and then for 2022, why is there an increase in number of employees? You have about 36 unclassified compared to 25 in this year. That's what I'm showing here in the budget. Go ahead. I know that you're. Go ahead. Ask a question for me to. You.
I don't have what you're looking at.
I'm sorry. Say again.
I don't have the document that you're looking at. The unclassified positions. Your question is the increase of unclassified positions, the LTAs, or under the federal programs, or?
Right. Well, these programs are reflecting funding for 36 unclassified employee positions. That's already in there, in your budget. Your request, 36 unclassified positions, and compared to what you had of 25 for FY22, where the funding was, substantially higher. And now the funding is lower, but you're asking for 36 unclassifieds. This is in your budget bill, your budget request.
Senator, the way these federal, the federal programs, the funding in the federal programs cover both the program funding and the administrative funding. Since in fiscal 22,
Right.
we didn't have for the whole year, for instance, the mortgage assistance program. Therefore, we didn't need people to manage that program. That started, I believe, in December of 21, which is fiscal 22, and therefore we needed to staff up that program. So the amount of funding really isn't a good measure of the need for employees. That funding came in advance from Treasury and is depleted as we pay out the program awards.
How is the amount of funding not relevant to the amount of people you're hiring and the need, because you need to pay those employees? So these are substantially, the amount that you're requesting in your budget bill is 36 unclassifieds, but how are you able to pay that when the funding is not as large as it was last year when you only had 25? That's just my question.
Yeah, it's relevant, but it's not proportional. Because that funding includes the program funding plus the administrative funding, the program funding is, I believe, is it 15% of the
For
funding?
example, like the homeowners, the administrative cost is 15% out of the 13 million that was awarded. For example, and then
I'm sorry, you said homeowners assistance fund? I thought it was 29 million.
for the homeowners,
Yeah.
for the emergency rental assistance program, that is 10% for the ERA1, the administrative cost.
Is that 33 million?
That's a 33.6 million.
Okay.
So the administrative cost is at 10%, which is
Right.
3.3 million. And then the 30 million is for the direct services. For the homeowner, because the homeowner assistance fund,
right?
that is 15% administrative cost. So out of the 13.5 million, the administrative cost is 2.038.
Okay, I think you're correcting me there on that one, because I have 29 million for the homeowners assistance fund, the HAF.
29 million is for ERA2, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And we haven't used that funding just yet. And for that particular funding for ERA2, it is at 15% for administrative cost.
Okay. Madam Deputy, let me just, you have 3 programs, correct? Federally funded programs that you oversee. The ERA, which is at 33 million,
Correct.
6 for that. Then you have the homeowners association, a homeowners assistance fund at 13?
13.5.
13.5, okay. I have 29. I don't know how
Yeah, the 29 million again is for the ERA2, Emergency Assistance Fund.
Is for ERA?
Yeah, Emergency Rental Assistance Fund.
Yeah.
That's the second funding.
The second, okay, the second
At
funding, right.
29 million.
Okay, and when did you receive this additional 29 million?
That was from U.S. Treasury, I believe it was in May of last year.
May of last year?
Yeah.
Okay, so that, okay, on top, and then so I'm having here the grant period for the ERA, the first at 33 million was in March of 2021. Are you saying that you were subsidized additional funding or given additional funding of
Yeah.
29?
The ERA, ma'am, the ERA1 was from the CARES Act, and that was provided to the agency in December of 2020. The program started in March 15 of 2021.
Right.
And then it ends at September of this year. So of course, it took some time for us to put the program together, and so the program was initiated on March 15 last year.
And the LIWAP, what was that amount?
The
Is that
LIWAP?
13 million?
No, LIWAP it's actually 206,000. It's a very
206,000.
minimal amount.
Okay.
Again, we just received that funding recently, and that program actually started 2 weeks ago, April 11th.
Okay, that explains my numbers being off then.
And that funding comes from the healthcare.
Yeah, so the LIWAP, what is your percentage of administrative fees for that one? So 10% as well?
No, because it's so minimal,
Yeah.
we are just utilizing, it's going to be less than 10%. We're utilizing, again, the staffing that we have on board.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's...
Makes sense.
Yeah, and it just kind of, the
All right.
processes and what the mission is kind of cross.
Okay, so you're looking at close to about, in administrative fees for these programs, about 13.5 million, or not 13.5, you're looking at 10, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 million. By the way, the LIWAP, that begins on April 2021 and ends on September 2024. Are you planning, is there any subsidies for that or any additional funding for that particular program since it's so low?
For the LIWAP, that actually started this year, April 11th of 2022, and it ends on September 30 of 2023.
Okay, I've had April
Yeah.
20, I'm sorry, April 11th, 2020 to September 2024?
September 30, 2023.
23, okay.
And
21,
this,
okay.
there's two funding sources for this particular program.
Okay.
Again, one comes from the CARES Act, and the other, 115,698 comes from CARES Act, and then 90,673 comes from ARP, with a combined of 206,371.
Okay, I know it's my last, I said it was my last question, but you, the equipment that was purchased during the program period required to return, is it required to return for the census? The operation of census, is this equipment required to be returned to the federal government, or does Guam
To the
maintain
census?
that equipment?
I'm sorry, for the census?
For the census, yeah, I know it's been a while, but, or a year or so, but,
They're returned, I mean, they're with the government. What was
yeah,
your-
in other words, do they have to be returned to the federal government? or-
No.
Okay, it stays on Guam.
Correct.
Okay.
Those, yeah, the federal government provided, under the census, the federal government provided systems, but those were returned, computer systems, those were returned back to the federal government.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and thank you for answering my questions and for all you're doing at DOA. And the DOA family, Biba, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tyree. Senator Nelson, do you have any question? And you'll be followed by Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay. I just have a couple questions, but before I start, I just want to acknowledge the exemplary work that Department of Administration has done in executing a lot of these programs. Really, we are grateful to you. The people of Guam are grateful to the work that you have done, especially those that are in the front at the lines and the work that you have continued to do through the COVID-19 pandemic.
And we'll make sure that everyone at DOA is aware of your comments. Thank you.
And I understand a lot of these programs were new and, you know, the people needed the assistance quickly, and so we really appreciate that. We appreciate the expeditious response that you have done. We appreciate the multitasking that, you know, the employees had to do, and so we're grateful for that. So please, you know that.
Thank you.
I just have a couple questions. It's, you talked about the FMIS system, and I just wanted to know, is this interoperable with the AS400, or is this completely replacing the whole system?
It's not going to operate on the AS400. We're preferably looking at an in-cloud solution, which doesn't require any hardware here, and therefore that hardware doesn't need to be maintained. That's our preference, and we're hoping that that's going to be the outcome.
Okay, and is this going to replace your whole system, the whole DOA system? Is that the intent?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is going to be a completely separate contract also?
Yes. With an in-cloud system, we're expecting that it will be a kind of fee-based system, because we're not, you know, I'm sure there will be some acquisition cost, but we're purchasing a system which we will hopefully pay for each month effectively, and it will probably be based on the number of users, and we want to make sure that we don't have too many users, and that's one of the things we're doing now, is we're trying to go through, and there were, I have to say, like 700 people that had access to our FMI system, where we're trying to wean that down so that we don't have to pay for 700 users.
I see, because you'll need the licensing for that.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate it. I believe that this system will also create a more secure network for department administration, right, to
Yes.
Prevent hacking and so forth.
Yes, it should comply with the latest, I think they're called FedRAMP
The
requirements.
NIST and cyber capabilities. Okay, very good. There is a statement, I do appreciate also your testimony. It's very clear. It's concise on all the activities that DOA has been doing, so I appreciate that as well. Thank you for that, and it's thorough. It helps us to understand the challenges that you had to endure and overcome, so thank you for that. When on page 3 on your testimony, you mentioned that not all emergency processes used by necessity during the height of the pandemic are suitable for indefinite use. And so I just wanted to ask, what are the emergency processes that you're going to do away with?
Well,
can you give us some examples?
Yes, you know, during certainly right at the very beginning of the pandemic, none of us really knew what was going to happen. So what we had to adapt our processes, and there were basically emergencies popping up all over the place that we had to resolve. We had, and this has been partly resolved by more recent legislation, emergency procurement, but we have a new procurement law that specifies more clearly what is an emergency. An example of one of the ways we have been able to take advantage of emergency is when we started with I guess it was in March or April of 2020, we had a lot of employees who were paid by check. Now we have about 13, and everybody else is paid by direct deposit. So that's something we would want to keep, but something we obviously don't want to keep, although we want to keep our employees safe, right, is we had to distance employees, we had to close them off from public contact, and we don't want to continue to do that because we service the public. And especially in these new programs, I think it would have been possible to do these new programs without the face-to-face contact with the public. So it's kind of it was mainly the practices that we had to adopt right at the beginning of the pandemic that we want to start phase out and become the face that we used to be.
Okay, thank you. For the teacher study that should be completed by next week, the teacher pay study, will this be ready in time for budget season? And are we allowed by statute or by law to receive also a copy of the teacher study when at the same time you give it to the executive branch? So that was 2 questions. As we're approaching GDOE's budget hearing, right? So I'm sure that their numbers does not include the teacher study because we don't really know the exact cost it will be. So I'm just wondering, will we be able to address that if GDOE's hearing comes in time in May?
I think, and I'll defer to the director on this, but that is a consideration, of course, when we are having our discussions, right? And we're very cognizant of, the cost impact it's going to have. So that's why we're trying to move and at least get recommendations for the governor ready by next week so that whatever decisions need to be made and whatever implementation we have to work out with DOE, they can factor everything in. In my discussions with their HR office, I said, I know everyone kind of might have a number or, something that they're looking at and might have already, have their own assumptions, but once it comes down, we're working with them to try and have them prepared as much as possible. So that's why we're working through those small issues to see, is it something material enough to handle in this study, or is that something that can be handled later? So we can have a collaborative thing. But as far as the transmission,
we are working, and I have a meeting with the superintendent, I think it's on Friday. We're working with DOE so that we're not working in different directions. We're trying to converge, not diverge. We're doing it because the governor asked us to do this study, and frankly, it was overdue. But the purpose of it is not to make life more difficult for DOA. The purpose is to make life easier for DOE because they don't have discontented teachers. So we're working together, and we expect to arrive at the same conclusion at the same time.
Okay, and when that study is complete, will the legislature at the same time receive a copy of that transmission, the same time you send it to the governor's office?
It will be transmitted to the governor will review it, and at that point it will be transmitted to the legislature.
Can we FOIA it from DOA?
Can you? That's a legal question. Okay. We hope that you will allow the governor to review it first and answer any questions. We're not perfect, and I'm sure she might have some questions. So we're hoping that the legislature will forbear for that.
Okay, thank you. One more question.
Yes, ma'am.
You did a breakdown of the division of departments of administration in the presentation earlier today, and it shows that the emergency rental assistance has 19 full-time employees. I don't know if anyone asked the question, and forgive me if I missed it. Are these unclassified or classified employees?
These are all unclassified employees for the programs.
Okay, and these unclassified employees, are they specifically working on the ERA, or are they tasked to do other things as well?
They're, for example, for the ERA, they are also working on, for example, like the program Salapi,
Okay.
in addition to that after working hours, correct.
Okay, so they're doing multiple functions.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank you again for the hard work that you've done these past 2 years. The island is very grateful, and the programs that you've moved forward, it goes a long way to help our island community. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Brown, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad you didn't forget that I was here. I'll make sure I'm the absolute last person to show up next time. I wanted to ask with regards to drug testing. I noticed that most of the divisions here literally have no funds set aside for drug testing. I think we're all well aware some of the bigger issues affecting our community right now is the drug pandemic that we have on the island. And I've noticed since last year, there's been a significant decrease in drug testing in the government. I understand you can't simply drug test for no reason. But we do know there are a number of designated positions in the Governor of Guam that can be tested at any time if they are determined by management and need to do so. So I just wanted to inquire for Department of Administration. I see some divisions have up to $520 set aside for drug testing. So what is the current policy for your drug testing at DOA, even though I don't believe you have designated positions, but I see a lot of zeros with requests for funding for drug testing.
Good afternoon, Senator. Thank you for the question. Yes, yeah, we don't ourselves have TDPs that we would have to set aside for any random drug testing or anything like that. The only thing we would set aside is if we're going to onboard new employees. That's what we would budget for. And I'm assuming that's why it's at that 500 mark. If we're looking at drug testing in totality for the government, you know, our budget hasn't had a provision in it to fund that, gosh, at least 6-7 years now, right? So previously, what used to happen is DOA used to get it in our budget. I think we would get like 20,000 or something like that to conduct random drug testing, which made it easy for us to go ahead and do that on our own. What's transpired since then is it's been fanned out to the agency budgets so that they can initiate that process with us. So the agencies actually will fund the random drug tests. They'll coordinate with us to go ahead and conduct it for them, and then they'll transfer the money our way to go ahead and do it. And that's the process that's been in place for at least 6 or 7 years.
So you have a certain amount of money that's been transferred to other GovCom agencies? You're
No,
of the thought that that's the case?
They transferred over to us. For instance, if let's take a TDP, an law enforcement agency says, hey, you know, we want to do a random drug test. They request it from us. We go ahead and try and coordinate with them the paperwork and then the costs associated to it, and then they'll JV the money over to DOA to conduct the drug test so we can.
And what has been more effective? I know you've been there a number of years. Is it easier to have the funds allocated to you? Or, because I also noticed a number of GovCom agencies have no requests for drug testing whatsoever.
Generally, it's easier for us to do it. If we have, let's say there's a established goal within the agencies, right, that we can drug test TDPs, it's easier for us to coordinate because we'll be able to go ahead and know that the funding's there to coordinate with the lab. And then what we do is we'll coordinate to the agencies that we're going to be conducting it. So that's how it worked. It was easier that way before.
And is that also the case for the hiring of new employees that have to be drug tested? How is that addressed since DOA, for the line agencies, you process the paperwork for the hiring?
I think the current system of them, the departments funding it is sufficient right now for the funding. The issue with the random is it's usually bulk testing, so that comes with a bigger price tag. And in the past, when we did have the funding available to us, then we were able to go ahead and coordinate those more regularly within the government.
Yeah, but I think we could agree that you guys generate your own budget that you provide to the legislature. We don't necessarily, unless we have specific interest in the categories listed. I mean, you as the department is presenting the budget. There's no reason DOA can't include that. I mean, you're asking for millions of dollars. I think a few thousand here or there wouldn't exactly, break the bank, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that's a discussion we can have, definitely, right? Looking at the statistics, there are currently some agencies who are coordinating with us now to do the drug testing. So maybe at the end of the fiscal year, we can take a look and see what the past few fiscal years look like and see if that's something we want to do.
Do you have the information available? I know we don't need the names of the individuals, but in terms of how many drug tests have been conducted, not just on a listing for new employees, but any random drug tests or any other drug tests that's been performed in the government. Do you have a listing of that for let's even say this last fiscal year?
We can give numbers by department, like if we did a random drug test of X amount of employees in any given department. We can share that.
So you'd have collective data for the line agencies in the Government of Guam. I think that would be good to know because, as I mentioned, I mean, it's ironic when our government's not reflective of the realities that are happening out in our community. And I think most of our people probably will say they feel very unsafe in this community, probably now more than ever. I certainly do. And because we have a rampant drug problem, I'm not as carefree with, oh, you know, let's legalize, let's do this, let's do that, when I see the impacts in our community and our people suffering because of that. And as a result of that, I just think we should be a little more responsible in our government to reflect those concerns, that we're not in any way aiding and abetting drug use in our government and abuse in our government that our people are paying for. I also wanted to ask with regards to, you know, I understand some of my colleagues have been inquiring and are happy to hear about potential pay increase studies that are being provided. And I think, you know, I think everyone would love to have a pay raise. I mean, I certainly, the few times I got one would be, say, oh, how nice. But I'm trying to understand in my mind, which I'm a little lost with this time when we're supposedly still under emergency, the island's still in a state of emergency that we have, and you're only like the third agency we've done for this budget year, that we're either hearing increases have been provided or the request for increases being provided to salaries at this time. So I'm just kind of curious with the timing. I mean, I think we all know it's an election year. No matter where we turn, left, right, up, or down, I think we're all hearing it's an election year. But again, I'd like to be reflective of the reality that's happening out there in our community and our economy. That when we are looking at increases at this time, again, I have nothing against increases. Certainly if they're deserved, they should be addressed. I'm just a little concerned while we're still in a state of emergency heading into year 3, and we have leaders in this community who seem to want to continue to keep this position of state of emergency in place. Why the urgency to address pay raises when we don't really know what the ability is of our economy to address continued revenue to sustain such increases? So I don't know, Director Byrne, if I can ask you that question.
Yes, Senator, and I'd be happy to respond. We want to keep people. Only yesterday, we had an individual whom we'd selected at GSA to be a buyer. We selected, and the employee declined the position because she was offered more pay by her current employer, which is a non-government employee. So we have a mandate that we have to carry out. We want to keep people, and we have to recruit people. Shane made a comment earlier about potential retirees. We have to plan for that too, but we don't want to end up with a skeletal agency that can't carry out the mandates that we want to do. We're not insensitive, you know, to what's going on around the world and around the island.
Well, and I understand that, Director Byrne. If we're looking at really critical specific positions, I can understand that, but we're looking in general at overall department and agencies. In mass.
Oh,
we're not looking at specific positions that are most critical during this so-called state of emergency that our island currently is under and has been for the last 2 heading into the 3 years. So I'm just relaying that because I don't know that we live in a world where, you know, we can defy gravity with the expectation that the revenue of the Government of Guam is going to continue to go up, up, and up. As they say, all things that go up will come down, and that's the concern I have, and the concern I have is that it's not that far in the future if the federal government doesn't continue to subsidize our current operations with, you know, the other side of the coin of this pandemic, which has been a very unfortunate situation in our island for those that have suffered and those that have lost, including friends and family that we all probably have been touched by this pandemic. But what I also see is the continued spending as if money's falling from the sky, and that we are adding on, not directly your agency, but we are adding on personnel. We are hiring with federal funds. We are providing pay increases that are currently being funded by federal funds with no idea as to how that's going to be sustained. And I'd hate to be in a position down the road to have to start saying, oh, you have to start cutting personnel in order to sustain all these increases. Because that, to me, I mean, just in terms of responsible management of the government, to me is an expectation.
The worst of all situations was the one that we were faced with, where a pay increase was recommended but was suspended because it couldn't be paid. Which is the competitive wage adjustment that never got paid. That's a terrible situation to be in, and we're suffering from it. I understand what you're saying. We're not insensitive to it, but we've got to keep, every agency has got to keep going, and many senators have been very, very kind and complimented the workers at this department for going above and beyond, and they have gone above and beyond.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing that. I mean, I'm not campaigning here, Mr. Byrne. I mean, if I was, that would be my day. That's not what I'm here for. I mean, I'm here to want to ensure that we're making responsible decisions. They're not always popular. I know DOA, as many other personnel in the government of Guam, have had to step up because of this. What choice did we have? What choice did we have when you get right down to it? We are all hired for a specific job and duty and responsibility, so I'm definitely not going to be the one to sit here and sugarcoat that reality. That's not who I am. That's not why I'm here. I'm just simply relaying that because when the time comes, and the time will come, I don't want to be in a situation because we continue to address raises at this time. When we get back to the reality of our own economy, that right now, if we were to live on our ability to generate without the infusion of the federal money, I don't know where we'd be. As long as I go to Tumon and see, pretty much, shuttered hotels, and we, aside from military personnel, now maybe a trickle here or there of tourists coming in. We're in pretty bad shape if we look at that. If we look at the economy through that, to that perspective, we're not doing that well. So I'm just relaying that because I'm not joining the chorus of, yes, please give us all the pay raise studies that you can at this time, because I just think the timing of it, and also the uncertainty of where we're heading, that's what bothers me more, is the uncertainty of where we're heading. I don't know if we're being responsible leaders, if our intent is to spend every penny we can get our hands on and just spend it however, and then when the time comes when we have to live on our own ability to generate funds, and we've been there. I've been there. I've been around here long enough to have been there, where we end up having to cut and then other critical services don't get provided because the government has gone beyond the ability of the taxpayers of Guam to afford. So I'm simply relaying that in terms of my perspective and my concern. With regards to emergency procurement with GSA, where are we? Are we still doing emergency procurement under this state of emergency that we're in? Because I know last year we had significant concern with quite an extensive listing of emergency procurement, some that, kind of raised an eyebrow here or there, really questioning if some of those services were needed in terms of, being able to respond to the pandemic. So I wanted to inquire, since we're still in a state of emergency, is that occurring now?
Emergency procurement, as I mentioned earlier, the definition changed with the new law that came in at the beginning of 2021. We do report, and with respect to the question that I got from Senator Taitagwe earlier in the week, was it the week or last week, whichever it was, we do report. I don't think the reports are sufficiently full, and we're looking at that, but we do report emergency procurement every month to the Speaker. It has decreased considerably because we're not in the same situation we were 2 years ago, where, like I said before, nobody knew what was happening from one day to the next. So it has decreased. There are occasions when an emergency, not necessarily related to the pandemic, but another emergency may arise, but it's considerably less than it was. In fact, it's down to a trickle.
You mentioned earlier with regard to GSA that the Chief Procurement Officer is on leave and the Acting Chief Procurement Officer is also on leave. That's what I heard earlier you mentioned. So who now is the authority at GSA then? Who's the signatory authority at GSA at the moment?
Well, the Acting Chief Procurement Officer is on very short-term leave, but it happens to cover today. So if any purchase orders need to be signed, she will catch up with it.
I wanted to ask also, because you mentioned that, you've seen an improvement with regards to the productivity of GSA over the last couple of months, but I also understand your Chief Procurement Officer has been absent or on leave for the last couple of months, and I think heading into the third month. So what would you explain as to the increase in productivity with the absence? And you have, looking at the staffing pattern, a very short list. I mean, you got, what, 2 or 3 buyers? One has a LTD. What does that stand for? Is that long-term disability? What's LTD for?
Long-term disability, yes.
So that employee, I assume, is not there
That's
at
correct.
work?
That's correct.
So then, well, unless you have a more updated staffing pattern than what we've been provided for this hearing, there's only 3 buyers listed then, minus that individual. So what would you account for I'm glad to hear increased productivity. I'm sure a lot of the government line agencies, because they need to procure whatever it is they need, whatever service or products or whatever it is they need. I'm sure it's something when it comes to GSA, and it's a higher level, as you mentioned, because the smaller purchase orders are accomplished at the department or agencies.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why productivity has increased, is that we were able more successfully to get agencies to exercise their purchasing authority at that level. Another reason is that we actually had fewer purchases that require these extended bids, and which I can't overemphasize how much work has to go into that. So there were more routine purchases made during the last 2 or 3 months, and also, I think they sent out a circular asking people to submit their requirements so that we could get it done before the end of the financial year, and that worked too.
Well, I hope so. I think we'd like to see the productivity, but again, it's contrary to the fact that your leadership is absent.
Well, I'd like to think that were I to be absent, the whole place wouldn't collapse.
I would hope so, but if it's doing better than it was when you're there, I have to wonder. So I'm just bringing that up, Director Byrne. You can. I'm not expecting a response. I'll leave that to you to just chuckle at or whatever you choose.
I will.
But I think we would want to see greater productivity out of GSA simply because of the work that they perform, and I hope that issue with regards to the employee that's been assigned there inappropriately and illegally is properly addressed, because that certainly has happened under your leadership and your watch.
Yes, sir.
So I will leave that
Senator,
to you.
I agree.
With that, Mr. Chair, I don't have any other questions. Quite a number of them have already been asked, and thank you, Director Byrne and your staff, for responding to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Nelson, you said you missed a question you wanted to ask, and then we're going to wrap it up because there is a round table at 5 o'clock, so I got
Yes, that's correct.
very short minutes to
Thank you,
close
Mr.
up.
Chair. Just real quick, it's my understanding that some of the law enforcement agencies are still pending their WUTIP, I guess their WUTIP pay from Typhoon WUTIP, the pay. Is there a due out for that, or is there a reason why it has not been paid out?
The what?
I know CQA is one of them. They still have not been paid for it.
We'd have to check with our payroll division and
Can
see.
we make sure we get them paid out? And thank you also for ensuring that the customs officers will receive their hazardous pay as they rightfully deserve this Friday. So we really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. The committee will conclude this budget hearing. The committee will continue to receive testimony. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing, and submit it via email, Senator Joe S. Agustin @gmail.com, or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 Marine Corps Drive, Tamuni, Guam. Sincerely for your attendance, Mr. Burns, and your staff. Thank you for all that you guys do. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The budget hearing on Bill 276-36 relative to the Department of Administration is now adjourned. It is now 4:52. Please be safe and take care. Thank you, sir.